Thank you so much for being here today. I know that it's kind of a midday thing and it might be hard to get on and watch this, but my hope at the end of this is that you have many questions answered about what Great Hearts distance learning looks like for students with disabilities, and that you will know what to expect, right, for these next unknown number of weeks that will be in fully online learning at Great Hearts. So bear with me, I'm going to share my screen and share some information with you all. Great. So what we'll be sharing with you today is a number of different things. First, I think I'd like you to notice that at the bottom of your screen there should be live closed captioning, and this is a feature that I wanted to show off today as something that our teachers can do with your students who need to see and hear at the same time. This is a feature that just exists with PowerPoint, so it's very cool. I thought that I would share it with you all. So I think first things first, right? If I was a parent of a child with an IEP, I would want to know what to expect. What do special education services and therapies, what are they going to look like for the next couple of weeks? After that, I'll talk about all the great work that our Academy ESS faculty have been doing. Many of them all summer, but definitely in earnest in these last couple of weeks. I'll share with you a little bit about how the home office, which is the team of my colleagues at the Great Hearts Management Organization that support the faculty and the headmasters in the schools and serving students with disabilities. I'll tell you a little bit about how we plan to support and what we've been working on over the course of the summer. I'll talk about the special education process. What I mean by that is how will IEP meetings look? What will 504 meetings look? How will we evaluate students who may need special education services? And then last, I'll address something that's relatively new, I think, to our communities, which is this question of what if a student needs in-person support for online learning, a student with an IEP specifically. So that's where we'll go. This is what you should expect and what your children should expect when school starts. And for some of you guys, that starts this week. For your special education services, it will be a mixture of live instruction, right, where they're interacting with their special education teacher, live support on, their general education content, the content of the Great Hearts classes from their general education teachers or from their special education teachers. And then there's also going to be some independent learning activities that they'll engage as well. So it should look fairly to what we're providing in general education. It will just be a lot more, one-on-one or small group. These sessions should fall within the normal school day. And this is an important thing to talk about because what we feel is it's very necessary to make sure that we're not asking our students with disabilities, especially, to be engaging all of their general education content and coursework, and then after hours, meeting with their special education teachers and therapy providers to get that necessary support. So we really do want to make sure that they have as normal a school day as possible. Our speech, occupational therapy, and counseling will all be live teletherapy, and generally you should expect for your students, especially in counseling, but most of those therapies will be provided either one-on-one or in a small group. So that's what you should expect when it comes to the special education services and therapies that your students will have. So our Academy ESS faculty have been working super hard to prepare to greet your students online again, which is something that I know that we were all hoping wouldn't have to happen. So the first thing that I think they've been focusing on, and they should be focusing on, is establishing a good line of communication and collaboration with you guys as parents. The thing that we learned this spring, I think above all, is that each family needed something a little bit different. Each student needed something a little bit different from their special education coordinator or teacher in order to access the learning activities. And so starting that strong communication early is important. One thing we're doing this fall that we didn't do in the spring is we're collecting consent from you all to participate in online services and therapies specifically. This is important because we'd like you to know, I think, again, what to expect, and also we'd like you to know, like, what you're agreeing to when you participate in the online services and therapies. So that's something that's really important. Another thing they're doing is determining case management assignments, and what this means is that they're talking to each other about which teachers should serve which child. For many of our schools that have veteran faculty who are coming back, it's probably going to look very much like last year. You should have your same case manager, your same point of contact at the school to support your children. Now, they're doing so much work that for this this PowerPoint, we actually had to give 2 slides to our Academy faculty. The last 3 things that I'd like to share with you that they're doing are 1, preparing schedules, so they should be in touch with you soon. You should know as parents that if your child has special education services and speech therapy, that we're going to let our providers of those therapies be in contact with you, right? So you should hear from a special education teacher. You should also hear very soon from your child's speech therapist about when they should be online to engage those sessions. Our faculty are also preparing learning kits for their students with IEPs who need supplemental devices or pencil grips or slant boards or really anything that a child might need to access the general curriculum when they're in school. They're putting a lot of thought into, okay, well, how do we make sure that they can still access the curriculum and practice the skills that we want them to learn at home? And so a big part of that is making sure that parents have the tools to support them. And so that's the idea behind the learning kits. And last, but certainly not least, maybe even most important, is our faculty are meeting with digitally, of course, and providing general education teachers with accommodations and other important information they need to know about your students in order to serve them well. So at the home office, and that's the team of people at Great Hearts network level who support our academies, one of our challenges that we had is that none of us at the home office, or few of us at the home office, have ever actually given online instruction to students. And so to get around that obstacle, what we're doing is we're leveraging the creative talent and energy and ideas of the network of those teachers who taught your kids in the spring. So the first thing we did is we surveyed our ESS faculty about their experience. We asked them what worked. We asked them what the primary challenges were, and we really got a good focus around these are the big things that we need to prepare to help them solve the problems of online instruction for students with disabilities. As part of that, we want to leverage our coordinators who are willing to, right? And our coordinators have graciously stepped up, many of them, to share their ideas and share their experience and share the things that worked. And we've started to develop structured Zoom sessions with the network, with the ESS faculty across the network, where that cross-pollination and idea sharing can happen. And last, we've been putting a lot of energy into preparing to support our special education teachers as they go back to brick and mortar and remote learning. We know that there's going to be a challenge, right, when some of our students are in school with us physically, and some of our students choose to remain in the digital or distance learning program. And so we've thought a lot about how to make sure that they're adapting their schedules so that we can serve both. And we've also spent a good deal of time thinking about what the physical space in the classroom, right, the special education classroom, should look like, and the kinds of equipment or anything that is needed to make sure that our students and our teachers can be together and be safe. Now I'd like to address this question of the special education process. And this is sort of the paperwork and meetings and evaluation side of special education, kind of moving away from instruction. So as you can see, IEP and 504 meetings will be done through Zoom. We did that in the spring and was successful with it. One thing we were not able to do in the spring is continue with special education evaluations that had been started or start any new ones. And so I'm really happy to report that all of our evaluation providers have found norm-referenced, valid, and reliable methods to conduct remote assessments of our students. All of our speech and language pathologists and occupational therapists have also developed methods to evaluate students remotely. So, you know, we can get going again on getting the information we need to serve our students. And our priority at this point is really going to be working through those evaluations that got held up in the spring. But we will be turning our attention to our students who may not yet have been evaluated but need it as well as we start school. So gratefully, I think my presentation isn't as long as maybe we thought it would be, so we can focus really on the Q&A portion. This is really the last thing that I'm going to talk about in sort of a formal way, and then we'll turn to the Q&A. But we've recently been sort of come to understand our obligation to provide access to a free, appropriate public education during remote learning. The Department of Education has issued some guidance in response to the governor's executive order that lets us know that there may be students, right, who for whom remote learning or online learning doesn't work, right? And so as we open our schools in the online format, we do have an obligation to provide access to this free, appropriate public education, even if they can't engage remote learning. What the department has guided us on is it is the student's IEP team that makes that determination. So they will get together and discuss the challenges that the child was having accessing the remote learning and talk about what kind of in-person support the school needs to provide in order that they can access the remote learning. And that looks like a whole variety of different things. So we can certainly talk about some of those things in the Q&A. What you should do, if you have heard about this or if this is the first time you are hearing about it, as a parent, if this is something that you feel like your child needs, the thing that you should do is reach out to your school and start a conversation with your ESS coordinator or case manager. You can talk about the challenges that they had, and the decision might be that you need to convene an IEP team meeting and talk about what that in-person support might look like. So just know that that option is available to explore and follow up if you feel like your son or daughter might need it. That comes really to the end of my prepared remarks. So I'm going to stop my share. Well, let's see, turn on my video, stop my share, and pitch it back to Leanne. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thanks so much, Tom. We appreciated hearing all that you and your team are doing for our students that need special services. And we have a few questions that have already come up. Just a reminder to parents that we won't be able to answer specific questions about your students, and because we don't have their IEPs in front of us, and FERPA laws would not allow us to answer those on social media. But we will be able to answer more general questions on this town hall today. So we have our first question that I'm going to ask today, and that is just, a really basic question, Tom. How are our ESS kids going to get extra help while they're doing online learning?
Well, I think what Leanne said is true, that that the extra help that a student might need depends largely on the student. But our schools have been thinking about this and preparing all summer for this idea that different students might need different things. And so one of the ways is to connect more with their special education teacher. One of the ways might be to connect with another faculty member at the school to sort out what that extra help that they need really is, right? Because if a student might need accommodations, right, and their accommodations aren't really working in the online environment, the first step there is to talk to either your 504 case manager or your ESS coordinator and talk about what accommodations don't work. If they need more, right, than just accommodations, then looking into what the sort of the tutoring options or what times your child's ESS coordinator might be available to connect with them, and just sort of go from there. Again, there's sort of a gradient or a spectrum of available supports from, you know, just providing or adapting those accommodations, maybe changing their plan a little bit, all the way to that in-person support that we talked about. And the decision makers on what a child needs shouldn't, I think, be made unilaterally, but should be made through that team process. So I hope that helps.
So if a student gets services through special education, Tom, do they have to come back to the school to receive those services? How will those services be provided?
It totally depends on the student. I think the plan right now is to provide all of our services to our students online through Zoom, through Google Classroom, and there's a number of other, you know, sort of Chrome extensions and add-ons that help with that service provision. But if that first plan for online learning doesn't work, the team would need to decide or come together and determine what kind of in-person support a student might need. So for online learning, right, at this point, as our schools open, the starting place is Google Classroom, is Zoom, is 100% remote. And, you know, I think our schools are already thinking, knowing this obligation, right, they're already thinking about those students who might need in-person support and planning for that. So parents, if you feel like that story is closest to your experience or situation, you know, reach out to the school, or you may have already heard from the school about that possibility.
What about if the student has physical therapy? How will that be provided, or occupational therapy?
Physical therapy is a good question. We don't have a high number, but that's certainly something that we would want to work out on a case-by-case basis. But we do have a high number of students in our network, I guess proportionally, right, who do receive occupational therapy. And our OTs are ready to go online and provide it via teletherapy. It may be that they'll need to send materials to the house for the student to work on, right, if it's fine motor skills or things like that. Or they may need to, you know, if a parent has the resources to print something, they could send things via email to the parents to print and prepare. But yeah, that's definitely going to be a challenge, and I know that they've been working on summer to figure out how to get around some of those obstacles.
Great, thank you. Here's another question. My student has organizational skills as part of his IEP, and the thing we struggled with most in the spring was the lack of support from the ESS teachers who were unfamiliar with Google Classroom. What are you doing to make sure that the ESS teachers are trained in depth on the distance learning platform this year?
Great question. I would say that there's a couple of levels of training that we're providing. One of the levels of training is coming from the Great Hearts Professional Development Team, and they've been working on training for our teachers on Google Classroom and on using these, you know, the remote tools and platforms that we have. The other thing is something that I described a little bit earlier, where we've recognized, right, that our students with disabilities, right, this situation is hard for everyone, I think, and but I think the challenges are exacerbated, right, if you're a child with a disability trying to engage in online learning. And so our coordinators were running to catch up in the spring and figure out, you know, what to do in each of these situations. And so our approach was to try to wrap our arms around what was the hardest, right? And then also get a sense of what worked. And so we have trainings planned this week and next week and the week after that as we transition, right, to online and as schools open up, where our teachers who were really great at Google Classroom and who were really successful and feel like they have a lot to share and offer, have an opportunity to speak to those things that worked. And our coordinators who struggled with that mode have a chance to ask questions and get support and get help so that they're collaborating with each other. It certainly is a big challenge for our team. Like I said, I haven't actually taught right online. The closest thing to doing it is something like this. So I'm so grateful for the coordinators in our network and all the work that they did. And they've continued to be giving of themselves and of their knowledge over the summer, and they will continue to support each other over the course of the fall.
Yeah, and somebody asked what platforms we're going to be using, and we are going to be using Google Classroom for our platform and Zoom again this year as well. And a lot of people are asking about, they're new to the school and their student either is coming with an IEP from another school, or they know their student has problems, but they don't currently have an IEP. Someone hasn't maybe reached out to them yet. What can they do?
I would contact your school directly, especially if you know that your student has difficulty learning. Reach out to the school. Start with I think an academic dean, and ask to be connected to the ESS department, right? Because a parent always has a right to make a formal request for an evaluation. The school will assess that request, and they may respond. Opening an evaluation, or they may want to put in place other supports for that student while they're here. So yeah, the best vehicle to get your child support, especially anything individual, is to reach out directly to your school.
Brandon, we have a question for you. It seems like Great Hearts is requiring more live instruction this year. Can you tell us a little bit more about why that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly true compared to what we did in the fourth quarter when we were kind of cobbling it together like everyone was. The thinking is just that while students are in an environment that's exclusively online, it's best for them to get as much real-time contact as is possible and reasonable. So it has nothing to do with the fact that it's easier. In fact, it's logistically much more challenging for us to have to run simultaneous sessions that are face-to-face and real-time feedback, but we think that that's critical for the success of students. That I could right now say, hey, Leanne, why don't you work one of these problems and tell me how you think it's going, right? That I'm getting the real-time feedback there that I can adjust and pivot just like I would in person, and how I help a student along. Now, certainly we're going to couple that with assessments and quizzes and work that can be done students can do on their own and then submit it, and then also recorded video. But the idea is just that we think it'll be educationally better for students and a closer approximation to what families signed up for when they came with Great Hearts, rather than just pre-recorded video or work on your own type thing.
Thanks, Brandon. Some people have asked questions about whether or not, if their student was getting reading intervention, whether or not they'll continue to get reading intervention, or if they were in reading groups, will they continue to be in reading groups or getting one-on-one reading attention? And yes, we have worked that into our general education program for kindergarten through second grade at all of our schools. Those students will continue to get one-on-one reading help with a teacher. They'll be seeing a teacher at least once every 2 weeks and reading with them. And those students who were in reading intervention will continue to be in reading intervention no matter what grade level that they are in as well. So the school will be reaching out to you and letting you know what times those reading interventions will be scheduled for. All right, let's see if there's another questions here. This question for Tom. Since students may have different teachers for online learning than they'll have when they return to campus, how will that transition be handled for students with an IEP? First of all, I do want to say, for the most part, we're trying to keep the teachers the same. Our headmasters are trying to keep schedules so that students will have the same teacher when they come back, but we do know that there is a chance that a teacher could change, or a student could get switched around. So if that happens, then how's the transition handled?
Well, I would say that it's much like starting a new year, right? Or maybe if a student changed from one section to another in the middle of the year, which has happened, right? And our coordinators are prepared to, would be prepared to meet with that new teacher, right, and share the student's IEP, the student's accommodation, as part of, right, building their schedule and figuring out when that student is going to be provided the special education services that they need in the brick and mortar. The good thing about, and man, I am really looking forward to having our students back in our classrooms when it's safe, but the good thing about that is we've been doing that for a long time. What's really critically important is making sure that we're tracking those students who are changing from one teacher to the next, and giving time for our coordinators and that teacher to meet and pass along the information that they need to know about that student.
I'm sorry, you couldn't hear me, could you? I'm going to say that again. Are parents assigned or students assigned a 504 coordinator in middle school? Like they are caseworkers?
Yes. Yeah, they do. Different middle schoolers handle it differently. Some have, right, a case manager per grade level. Some have a case manager that's for a band. And some have one 504 coordinator for the entire school. And that's really just depends on how many 504 plans, or how many students with 504s rather, go to that school. The schools all sort of respond to the need accordingly. But yeah, you should have a contact. And one thing that I guess I'd like to say is that you know, we're all working as hard as we can to get our schools up and running online, and then also simultaneously prepare to be back in brick and mortar. So if you haven't heard from your school or your coordinators, please do reach out. They love our kids and they really are working hard to serve them, but it's possible, right, that that they just need a prompt from you to engage that conversation. So I really encourage you guys to start doing that. If you're feeling nervous and you haven't heard from them, nothing is better than a connection.
Yeah, I agree. If you're not getting a response from the 504 coordinator or the ESS coordinator at your school, contact the headmaster. Let the headmaster know that you're not getting the response that you want. If you're not getting a response from the headmaster, contact myself. Or if your student is in the archways, or contact Mr. Crow, Brandon. If your student is in the middle school or the prep, we'd be happy to help you to get the responses that you're looking for. Let's see if we have time for some more questions, and we do. Okay, let's see. This is a question, let's see, I'm trying to find a question that we haven't already answered. Yeah, the change for students, Mr. Dobler, this one is for you. The change from going from online learning back into the classroom. So those students who are in online learning and now they're going back into the classroom, how is that going to be handled? So that question's for Mr. Dobler.
I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but I think I'll give it a whirl. The way that we've thought about their services, right, when they're online, and maybe the changes or adaptations that we make to their IEPs while they're online are very temporary. And we'll handle that probably through the addendum process. And the idea is that when they come back to us, right, that those changes will no longer be in effect, and the IEP that was in place when we went to remote learning, like their services will revert to that plan, right? Now, if that's not a well-calculated plan, then the team will need to get together and decide what to do, or if the child's needs have changed, right, since March, then we'll need to, each team will need to get together and figure out what that child needs. This brings up another really interesting question that we've been wrestling with, which is the thought or the question about providing compensatory education to students who were in distance learning. Now, it should be public knowledge, and if it's not, I think it really should be, that schools will need to wrestle with this and figure out what our students need And I want to let you parents know that we are thinking about this and about how that'll look. And one of the things that we generally concluded is that the time to talk about what a child might need in terms of compensatory education, for the most part, is going to be when we have them back at school, right? So a part of that transition back to the classroom will be assessing what they've missed, right? Even if they got every minute in their IEP from March 16th all the way up to when they return, it's still possible, right, that they haven't made the progress that we would have hoped or expected. And so the team will need to ask, okay, well, what do they need in light of that? So that's something that's going to be really important about the transition.
Yeah, if you could just stay on for a minute. There's a question about whether or not if a student has an outside therapist that they're working with, somebody not from the school, and can that therapist still continue to work with them while they're doing their online schoolwork? Is there any kind of special permission they need? Is there any paperwork they have to fill out in order to do that?
That's a good question. I actually haven't considered it. What I can tell you is that we have had outside therapists participate and help our students in our schools before. So my guess is that there's an avenue for it, right? But it probably wouldn't be through the IEP process per se, but through a conversation with your headmaster and your child's teachers specifically to say, hey, we have this resource. This person is working with our son or daughter, and they're really effective. And so on that case-by-case basis, I think that a parent should figure out how to wrap that support in to all of the things the school's already doing. And generally, I think we've made it work for the most part at our schools in the past. So I think that there's an avenue for that in online learning as well.
How can someone get more information about everything that's offered for under special education services?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, you can always reach out to me. You can also reach out to your school. I can talk about broadly to anybody about what we offer, about your rights as a parent, about how to gain access to these services if your child needs it. It's important to note that all these things are a team decision, and that oftentimes schools do make the final determination around what a child needs. But if you have questions about how it works, I'm glad to connect with parents and then also send you guys in the right direction when it comes to your school and your points of contact at the schools. So if not me, I would contact your school directly, and they should also be able to share with you what's available. There's also a number of community resources out there. One organization that I really love working with is called Raising Special Kids, and they just have a ton of training and people that are always ready to talk to parents about what their child might need and to help them navigate the process and the system of special education. It's daunting. I've lived in it as a professional for years, right? And so it's very comfortable for me to talk about it and think about it, but I can imagine how big and cumbersome and possibly confusing it would be if you just realize, like, wait, what? There's resources or things that I could possibly get to help my child. How does that happen? Well, the journey from that question to possibly getting support for students is long and complicated, and it's unfortunate that it's long and complicated, but that's how it is.
If somebody's new to the school and they come to the school with an IEP, how long is it before their services actually start? And tell me a little bit about how that process works. Do I have to bring my IEP to the school and show it to them? Do I have to contact them? Are they going to contact me? How is all of that going to work?
It's funny. I think I have two different answers to that question. In normal functioning, here's how it should work, right? Especially if you signify it on your enrollment paperwork that your child has special education support or support of a 504 plan, that should be flagged and directed to our coordinators on our campuses. So they should be aware, at least, that your child has a plan. Now, part of their work over the summer is trying to get these plans from the school that your child is coming from. And that is usually successful. We send a records request and the paperwork comes, and we assess the needs of the student, and then reach out to parents. Oftentimes a meeting isn't needed, right? Because if we can get the IEP, the services should start when school starts, right? They should start, they should meet their special education teacher in that first week. They should start services in earnest within the first 2 weeks easily, no later certainly than the second week. And it should be automatic, right? But there's a number of different things or places where that information transfer can break down. And my guess is that those places where transfer of information can break down have only sort of become more problematic because many of us are working from home. So what I would advise a parent is, if you have an IEP and you're coming to our school from another school, is bring that IEP to your school as soon as possible. Let them know, make sure, right, that they have it. Under any other year, we would have gotten that from the school that your child's coming from. But I don't want to promise that that process has worked smoothly this year. And so your grace is appreciated and your patience, but yeah, the best thing that you can do is be proactive.
And when would that IEP be implemented? When would those services start?
They should start immediately. As soon as your team knows that your child has an IEP, they should be getting in touch with you to talk about scheduling. Now, I know that that's what our coordinators are furiously working on right now. If they're not watching this Facebook Live, they're creating schedules and figuring out how in the world we're going to serve all these students online. I'm confident that they'll do it, but that's what's happening as we speak.
If somebody right now doesn't have an IEP, but they think their student needs special services, maybe they think their student might need speech therapy, or they're recognizing a reading problem with their student or something like that, what should they do?
Contact their school, express their concerns. I would start with the teacher and have the teacher refer them maybe to an academic dean. There's a lot that our schools can do between the point of a concern raised by a parent or teacher and an IEP, but sometimes that's where we get, and that's okay. That's what we should be doing, right? Is figuring out what it is that a child needs, and if we can provide it through intervention or reading groups or something like that, I think that's preferable. But if a child needs to be evaluated for special education, we have all the tools that we need to do so.
Great, thank you. I think this is a question that was asked previously, and it's come up a couple of times. Are you guys going to be providing any kind of extra counselor support on campus for mental health issues for our students? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm not the director of counseling. She's on my team and she's great. So let me go to my notes on this one. So we do have, she has been working, she and her team have been working all summer on a couple of different things. First priority is those students who receive counseling are going to continue to receive counseling. Students who may need counseling to start, right, the referral process should start soon after school resumes session. But what they've also planned is, especially for in the brick and mortar, when we return to brick and mortar, they've developed a relatively straightforward curriculum on coping strategies for students who may experience anxiety or feel stress, right, because they're returning to school after being virtual for so long, and deliver that to the academies to implement. And implementation of that really is up to the headmasters, but we broadly provided those resources to our schools so that our teachers can be prepared to support students who are struggling with the emotional impact of the pandemic, the emotional impact of isolation and things like that. Our counselors will also be running more groups, support groups or counseling groups than in the past, that are open for any student who's interested in being a part of it, right? So those are some of the things that our counselors have done to make sure that that when we return, right, any student who really needs that support has a couple of different levels that they can access support, if that makes sense. Our counseling team hasn't really grown since May, but all of their focus is on this, this experience that we're all having, right, and responding to the needs of our students. They've also put together some materials for teachers to read and think about, and tools for them to support kids who are online, right, and who can't come back, because that can be a very isolating experience as well. So there are a number of things that the team has been thinking about and doing in preparation for return.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Tom. We're going to wrap it up now, and want to just thank everybody for attending our town hall today, and want to thank Brandon and Tom for being with us today, and for our families for joining us. If you still continue to have questions, and I'm sure that you do, you can email your questions to questions@greatheartsaz.org. You might also find some more information on our greatheartsamerica.org Safe Return AZ site. So that's greatheartsamerica/safereturn/AZ. That's a site where you'll get more information about this particular time period when we're doing distance learning. You can also email Mr. Dobler, and of course, most importantly, contact your local school, contact your headmaster, your ESS coordinators at your school if you have questions specifically about your student and about how that's going to work with your student. And if you need particular help with them, or if you'd like for your IEP team to meet, certainly you can call for a meeting for them to meet together, or your 504 team. I want to thank you again for joining us today, and hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks again. Bye-bye.